Hello everyone, how are you? Lovely to see you all. Well, today I have chosen one of my favorite persons, Maya Angelou, and I have chosen to read out an extract from her autobiography, which has the name of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Now this lady, she is a black African American, and she was born in Missouri, and she grew up in the segregated South. That means where the African Americans were kept when they were taken away from Africa to slave on the cotton fields and in their rich whites' homes. So she has that background, but she was able to break out from and break through the barriers of racism and poverty. And she has been a streetcar conductor, and she has been a journalist. She is an amazing writer. She has written poems, she has written plays, she has written books, and she is an actress and most of all a journalist, a civil rights worker, a teacher, and a poet. In January 1993, she had the honor of reading her poem On the Pulse of Morning at President-elect Bill Clinton's inauguration, a poem that she had been asked to write for the occasion. So she is an amazing personality who went through such difficulties, such discrimination, and such humiliation in her life, but she fought against that, and she stood like a tall tree and did not waver from her determination and her ambitions. And she writes beautifully about her childhood, where she was living with her grandmother and who owned a store, and how she has described the shades of light and joy and her activities and her feelings and about little things. And then how another lady, an educated lady, comes into her life and opens another window for her. So let's see how it goes. I hope you enjoy it, and this is also meant for older children from like age of 13 to 16. They'll thoroughly enjoy that, I'm sure about that. So let's get started. She writes, we lived with our grandmother and uncle in the rear of store, which my grandma had owned some 25 years. Early in the century, Mama, whom they soon stopped calling her grandmother, sold lunches to the sawmen in the lumber yard, e-stamps, and the seedmen at the cotton gin. Her crisp meat pies and cool lemonade, when joined to her miraculous ability to be in two places at the same time, assured her business success. So from being a mobile lunch counter, she soon built up a store because of her hard work and determination, that she had the store built in the heart of the Negro area. Over the years, it became the lay center of activities in town. On Saturdays, barbers sat their customers in the shade on the porch of the store, and troubadours on their ceaseless crawlings through the South leaned across its benches and sang their sad songs of the brazos while they played Jew's harps. The formal name of the store was Johnson General Merchandise Store. Customers could find food staples, a good variety of colored thread, hogs, chickens, corn, coal oil, lamps, light bulbs, all utility stuff. Shoestrings, hairdressing, balloons. See how enterprising she was, and flowerseeds. Anything not visible had only to be ordered. So resourceful her grandma was. Until We became familiar, she writes, enough to belong to the store, and it to us, we were locked up in a fun house of things where the attendant had gone home for life. Weighing the half-pounds of flour, excluding the scoop, and depositing them dust-free into the thin paper sacks held a simple kind of adventure for me. I developed an eye for measuring and got appreciated. For that, I was absolutely accurate. Our appreciative customers used to admire. Sister Henderson sure got some smart grandchildren. If I was off in the store's favor, the eagle-eyed, excuse me, I'm missing the line. Okay, the eagle-eyed women would say, put some more in that sack, child. Don't you try to make your profit off me. Then I would quietly but persistently punish myself for every bad judgment. The fine was no silver wrapped kisses, the sweet chocolate drops that I loved more than anything in the world. And except Bailey, she was extremely fond of her brother. And maybe canned pineapples. And my obsession with pineapples drove me mad. I dreamt of the days when I would be grown and able to buy a whole carton. Although, she writes, the syrupy golden rings sat in the exotic cans on our shelves year-round. We only tasted them during Christmas. Mama used the juice to make always black fruit cakes. Then she lined heavy soot-encrusted iron skillets with the pineapple rings for rich upside-down cakes. We received one slice each, and I carried mine around for hours, shredding off the fruit until nothing was left except the perfume on my fingers. See how she describes the lingering smell and her obsession with the flavor of the pineapples, how she relished them. I like to think that my desire for pineapples was so sacred that I wouldn't allow myself to steal a can. She would not like to disrespect her association with the pineapples by stealing it from a grandma's or mama's store, which she could, and eat it alone out in the garden. She must have thought about it, she says. All right. And then, until she was 13, they left Arkansas for good. The store was her favorite place to be. Alone and empty in the mornings, it looked like an unopened present from a stranger. Opening the front doors were pulling the ribbon of the unexpected gift. The light would come in softly, easing itself over the shelves of mackerel, salmon, tobacco, thread. It fell flat on the big vat of lard, and by noontime during the summer the grease had softened to a thick soup. Whenever I walked into the store in the afternoon, I sensed that it was tired. So she personifies it beautifully. And then in the evening, when they locked it, the promise of magic mornings returned to the store and spread itself over the family in wash-life waves. For nearly a year, I sopped around the house when she came back from her mother and was to stay with her mama. The store, the school, and the church, like an old biscuit, dirty and inedible. She found everything kind of to her distaste. Then I met, or rather got to know, the lady who threw me my first lifeline. Mrs. Bertha Flowers was the aristocrat of black stamps. She had the grace of control to appear warm in the coldest weather, and on the Arkansas summer days, it seems she had a private breeze which swirled around, cooling her. She was thin without the taut look of wiry people, and her printed voile dresses and flowered hats were as right for her as denim overalls for a farmer. She was a side's answer to the rich to the richest white woman in town, right? So this is Mrs. Flowers, right? And I must show you the picture, which I forgot, of the title and the store. Here you go. All right. You could see it clearly. Okay, a sip of water. You can absolutely imagine and have that vision of whatever she's describing, and her meeting with this sophisticated aristocratic lady who was dark-skinned like her. She had the grace of control to appear warm in the coldest weather, and on the Arkansas summer days it seemed she had a private breeze which swirled around, cooling her. So she was unruffled all the time. She was thin without the look of wiry people, and she was our side's answer to the richest white woman in town. Her skin was a rich black that would have peeled like a plum if snagged. But then no one would have thought of getting close enough to Mrs. Flowers to ruffle her dress, let alone snag her skin. She didn't encourage too much of familiarity. She wore gloves too. I don't think I ever saw Mrs. Flowers laugh, but she smiled often, a slow widening of her thin black lips to show even small white teeth, then the slow, effortless closing of her lips. When she chose to smile on me, I always wanted to thank her. The action was so graceful and inclusively benign. She was one of the few gentlewomen I have ever known, and has remained throughout my life the measure of what a human being can be. One summer afternoon, sweet milk fresh in my memory, what an analogy, she stopped at the store to buy provisions. Another Negro woman of her health and age would have been expected to carry the paper sacks home in one hand. But Mama said, "Sister Flowers, I'll send Bailey up to your house with these things." She smiled that slow, dragging smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I prefer Margaret, though my name was beautiful when she said it. I've been meaning to talk to her anyway." They gave each other age group looks, my Mama and Mrs. Flowers. Mama said, "Well, that's all right then. Sister, go and change your dress. You going to Sister Flowers." There was a little path beside the rocky road, and Mrs. Flowers walked in front, swinging her arms and picking her way over the stones. She said, without turning her head to me, "I hear you're doing very good schoolwork, Margaret, but that it's all written. The teachers report that they had trouble getting you to talk in class." We passed the triangular farm on our left, and the path widened to allow us to walk together. I hung back in the separate unasked and unanswerable questions. "Come and walk along with me, Margaret." I couldn't have refused even if I wanted to. She pronounced my name so nicely, or more correctly, she spoke each word with such clarity that I was certain a foreigner who didn't understand English could have understood her. "Now, no one is going to make you talk. Possibly no one can. But bear in mind, language is man's way of communicating with his fellow man, and it is language alone which separates him from the lower animals. That was a totally new idea to me, and I would need time to think about it. Your grandmother says you read a lot, every chance you get. That's good, but not good enough. Words mean more than what is set down on a paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with the shades of deeper meaning. I memorized the part about the human voice infusing the words with the shades of deeper meaning. It seemed so valid and poetic. She said she was going to give me some books, and that I not only must read them, I must read them aloud. She suggested that I try to make a sentence sound in as many different ways as possible. I'll accept no excuse if you return a book to me that has been badly handled. My imagination boggled at the punishment I would deserve if in fact I did abuse a book of Mrs. Flowers. Death would be too kind and brief. The odors in the house surprised me. Somehow I had never connected Mrs. Flowers with food or eating or any other common experience of common people. The sweet scent of vanilla had met us as she opened the door. Wow, I made tea cookies this morning, you see. I had planned to invite you for cookies and lemonade so we could have this little chat. The lemonade is in the icebox. I'd followed that Mrs. Flowers would have ice on an ordinary day, when most families in a town bought ice late on Saturdays only a few times during the summer. She took the bags from me and disappeared through the kitchen door. I looked around the room, and I'd never in my mildest fantasies imagined I would see brown photographs that leered or threatened from the walls. And the white, freshly done curtains pushed against themselves and against the wind. I wanted to gobble up the room entire and take it to Bailey, who would help me analyze and enjoy it. Just a reminder, Bailey is her younger brother. Have a seat, Margaret, over there by the table. She carried a platter covered with a tea towel, although she warned that she hadn't tried her hand at baking sweets for some time. I was certain that, like everything else about her, the cookies would be perfect. They were flat, round wafers, slightly browned on the edges, and butter yellow in the center. With your cold lemonade, they were sufficient for childhood's lifelong diet. Remembering my manners, I took nice little ladylike bites off the edges. She said she had made them expressly for me, and that she had a few in the kitchen that I could take home to my brother. So I jammed one whole cake in my mouth, and the rough crumbs crashed inside of my jaws. Oh, all right. And if I hadn't had to swallow, it would have been a dream come true. As I ate, she began the first of what was later called my lessons in living. She said that I must always be intolerant of ignorance. Intolerant of ignorance, but understanding of illiteracy. that some people unable to go to school were more educated and even more intelligent than college professors. She encouraged me to listen carefully to what country people called mother wit. Then in those homely sayings was couched the collective wisdom of generations. When I finished the cookies, she brushed off the table and brought a thick small book from the big bookcase. It was then she started reading. It seemed that I was reading poetry. It was the best of times and the worst of times. Her voice slid in and curved down through and over the words. She was like singing. Okay. Her sounds began cascading gently. I knew that from listening to 1,000 preachers that she was now nearing her end. How do you like that? It occurred to me that she expected a response. The sweet vanilla flavor was still on my tongue. And the reading was a wonder in my ears. I had to speak. How she uses all her senses, how they were stirred up with that experience of meeting Mrs. Flowers. Yes, ma'am, it was the least I could do. There's one more thing. Take this book of poems and memorize one for me. Next time you pay me a visit, I want you to recite. Yeah. I have tried often to search behind the sophistication of years for the enchantment I so easily found in those gifts. The essence escapes, but its aura remains. And to be allowed to be invited into the private lives of strangers and to share their joys and fears was a chance to exchange the southern bitter wormwood for a cup of meat or a hot cup of tea and milk with Oliver Twist. When I said aloud, it is a far better thing that I do than I have ever done, tears of love fill my eyes at my selflessness. On that first day, I ran down the hill and into the road. Mind the lines I just read were from the extract from the book that she was reading out to Maya. On that first day, I ran down the hill and into the road, and I had the good sense to stop running before I reached the store. I was liked, and what a difference it made. I was not respected as Mrs. Anderson's grandchild or Bailey's sister, but for just being Margaret Johnson. All right, childhood's logic never asks to be proved. I didn't question why Mrs. Flowers had singled me out for attention, nor did it occur to me that Mama might have asked her to give me a little talking to. All I cared about was that she had made tea cookies for me and read to me from her favorite book. It was enough to prove that she liked me. So what I loved about it, she brings everything alive, and how she savors and relishes and thrives on the positive, pleasant, delicious memories of her childhood instead of dwelling on her experiences of stress, pain and hardships. She was an amazing woman, a journalist, a poet, a teacher, a human activist, an actress, a teacher, a mentor. Amazing. You must read up about her, and you must read her books and poetry. I'm sure you will love it. I hope you enjoyed this extract as much as I did. Lovely seeing you, and see you soon. Bye-bye. ये क्या है?